All right, folks. Let's go back to a time when wrestlers were larger than life. Territory still ruled the land. And kayfabe wasn't just protected, it was sacred. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the July 1977 issue of Wrestling Superstars. This wasn't just a magazine, it was a time capsule from an era where Bruno Sammartino reigned supreme, Andre the Giant was a terrifying force of nature, and guys like superstar Billy Graham were redefining what it meant to be a wrestling star. This issue, it's packed. We've got dream match scenarios, hard hitting interviews, wild territory coverage, and even a bizarre section where someone thought it would be a good idea to predict the future careers of wrestlers using astrology. Yeah, it's going to be a fun one. So before we get into it, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and join the channel for early access to more vintage wrestling content. Let's keep these old school classics alive. Now let's turn the page and see what 1977 had to offer. First things first, let's talk about this cover. Right up front, we got Bruno Sammartino because, of course, we do. It's 1977, and Bruno is still the king of the wrestling world. Inside, we get an article hyping up how Bruno, despite being in the game for years, is better than ever. Then there's superstar Billy Graham, who's out here making sure you know that he is the star of the 70s, the most stylish, most outrageous, most marketable man in wrestling. And then looming in the background like a movie monster, we've got Andre the Giant. Because in 1977, Andre was still this mystical, unbeatable force. The legend was still growing, and this magazine makes sure to tell you that the best of Andre is still yet to come. Flipping through the first few pages. The layout of this magazine is classic wrestling superstars. Bold headlines, dramatic photography, and articles written like they were cut straight from a pulp novel. This was wrestling journalism before the internet, when everything was about hyping up the legends and making sure the mystique stayed alive. And let me tell you, they knew how to sell a story. We've got a fantasy booking scenario pitting Terry Funk against his own brother, Dory Funk Jr. Now, if you know the Funks, you know this wouldn't just be a match, it would be a straight up fight. Dory was the traditionalist, the NWA man, the grappler. Terry, he was just starting to show signs of the madman he would become. The magazine breaks this down like it's a legit dream match. Okay, this one is Peak Billy Graham. The article is literally titled, "I'll pay $100,000 for a world championship belt." This was Graham in full superstar mode, basically claiming he'd do anything to become champion. He was the perfect anti-Bruno, all flash, muscles, and arrogance. He was already putting it out there that he should be world champion, and let's be honest, he wasn't wrong. The way this article is written, you can feel the magazine wanting you to believe Graham could dethrone Bruno at any moment. Now, this is an interesting one. The article is all about how Andre's legend is growing, how he's undefeated, how no one knows how big this guy's going to get, both in size and in status. What's funny is they treat Andre like this unstoppable force, but almost seem unsure where his career is going to go. Looking back, we know exactly where he was headed, to becoming one of the most famous wrestlers in history. But in 77, they were just scratching the surface. And then we get this, a full spread where they basically predict the future of wrestlers using astrology. Harley Race, his NWA title reign won't last long. Spoiler, he'd go on to have 7 reigns. Bruno Sammartino, he'll wrestle for a few more years, then retire for good. He'd return in the 80s. Bob Backlund, this man will be a major star. A year later, he wins the WWF title and holds it for 6 years. Okay, whoever wrote this accidentally nailed Backlund's future. So what do we take away from the July 1977 Wrestling Superstars? Bruno was still the king. Superstar Billy Graham was already setting himself up for the title. Andre was still a mystery. Dream matches were wild in 77. And apparently astrology could predict Bob Backlund's career. This magazine is a snapshot of wrestling before the 80s boom, when it was still all about territories, legends, and mystique, and you gotta love it. Now, before we go, if you enjoyed this trip back in time, hit that like button, share the video, and subscribe. And if you want early access to future episodes, join the channel for exclusive content. Until next time, keep your magazines mint, and remember, in wrestling, the past is never really the past.